Hey guys, it's Gotea here. Before I start the video, I just want to give a quick apology. I am in the process of moving as well as getting finished with finals, so I have not been keeping my normal upload schedule, but fear not, as we get into summer and next year and everything else, basically anything after these next 2 weeks, I'll maintain a pretty normal upload schedule, so bear with me here. But without further ado, let's get into this video. My husband and I went primitive camping in the 10,000 Islands of the Florida Everglades. On the first day, we took our heavily laden kayaks from Chokoloskee to Pavilion Key. We had the entire island to ourselves and set up camp on the beach of the island. We were remote and could only barely see the adjacent islands. To the west was nothing but the wide open Gulf of Mexico. So the island is inhabited by a maroonding band of raccoons, which will go to great lengths to get your food and water. So we ended up having to bury our food beneath the kayaks, and the raccoons still made a valiant effort to get it. Although our cooler had no food, they did get into it and played with the ice and the water. After things settled down, we went to sleep to the sound of gently lapping waves on the beach, which was just a few feet from our tent. We were at the top of the tide line, which was evident from a recent storm, so we weren't really worried about getting wet. Around 2 a.m., I woke to an eerie silence. I went outside and was regaled by the kind of night sky that takes your breath away. I shone my flashlight out to the water and realized that the reason for the silence was because there was absolutely no water. The beach, where we had fished just a few hours before, now extended beyond the reach of my flashlight beam. I walked out a ways and still couldn't find the ocean. I can't describe the absolute feeling of remoteness and isolation that I experienced at that moment. That was right after the tsunamis, and I have to admit that I was a little freaked out. Trying to calm myself, I went back into the tent. I was fairly sure that it was just the tide, but I couldn't quiet the tiny voice which kept telling me that a huge tsunami was on the way and that this amazing, beautiful experience would be my last. It actually ended up just being the tides, but the return of the lapping waves on the incoming tide made for one of the best sounds I've ever heard. A few years ago, I was on a mission trip to Kenya, and we were camping out in the bush for a few days. The whole thing was pretty uneventful, but there was this one night that the moon was either full or just randomly super bright, and it made the sides of my tent kind of transparent to the outside, if that makes sense. So if something were to walk past my tent, I would easily be able to see the silhouette from inside my tent. You might see where this is going. I woke up at one point in the middle of the night to the sound of quiet feet shuffling near my tent. When I lifted my head up, I saw the silhouette of a person creeping past my tent. He was wearing a large, terrifying-looking headdress, which, after I described the incident to my team leader, I learned was the garb of a witch doctor. Anywho, if you can figure this out, I didn't sleep the rest of that night. So I work search and rescue in the Scandinavian mountain range, and were called out to assist with finding a family that had ended up getting themselves pretty lost. We did flybys with helicopters and managed to spot an abandoned campsite behind a small ridge on the side of a low mountain. I should note that this is not an entirely remote area. It's common for families to hike there actually, often with their children. The trails are well maintained and easy to follow. We marked the spot with a smoke canister from the helicopter and called in on the ground team before looking for a place to set down. After about 20 minutes, the ground team found the site using the green smoke pillar, but no campsite was ever found. First thought was that the smoke canister had gone downhill a bit, or that the smoke had pocketed somewhere else, but they found the actual canister. We also had photos and coordinates from the campsite, which had an old backpack and some old items. It definitely appeared abandoned, but the same site was just gone when Team 3 arrived. Police officially called off the search as the investigation landed on the family not wanting to be found, and seemingly had cleared out the site between marking it and search and rescue arriving. This seems strange to me though, and I'm not sure why they would do this. We were never connected to the case after that, and to my knowledge, these people were never found. So, this was maybe 7 to 8 years ago, when I was 20 and in a really bad way. I'd been fucking up my life via heroin for the past year, but after lots of help and love and luck from friends and family, I finally was getting my head cleared. Almost there, above the black tar hell I'd got myself into. I decided to get out of the city and drove 2 hours out to a smaller town in Missouri where Google Maps told me a small campsite by water was. I know there shouldn't be very many campsites because it had gotten cold, about 40 degrees or so at night. Nearly there, as I'm driving down a misty morning road, just a picturesque, straight two-lane highway, there's this object laying in the road about a half-mile up. I slow my approach and can see it's a shaggy dog, just hanging out. I stopped and rolled down my window right next to it. She came up, licked my hand, and wagged her tail a bit. She seemed to expect nothing from me. She had no tag, no tattoo or chip, I later checked. It was just a dog with no name. So naturally, I popped open the passenger side door for her and she was glad to hop in. So now I got this dirty but friendly companion for my little excursion, a dog with no name. The entrance to the campsite was only a half-mile further, and as I suspected, there was no one around. I just dropped a 5 in the honor box and picked the site closest to the stream. I set up my tent, the same one I'd set up for years with my dad as a kid, collected some dirty sticks, not hard to do at this time of year, and started a fire. The dog with no name just circled the campsite, looking content enough to sniff some leaves and roll around in the mud. I went to check out the rivulet, about 30 feet wide. It had a man-made stone dam you could walk across. To the west was the deeper part of the river, sort of pooling around the dam, then maybe an 8-foot drop to the east into calmer streams. Instantly I wanted to go on, cleanse myself, symbolize, baptize, whatever. I grew up Catholic, so this kind of shit runs through my head to this day, though I'm far from religious. During all of this, the dog sees my scoping, and just watches. I can't bring myself to do it though. I'm hugely disappointed in myself, but it's cold, it's brackish, I don't have a towel. So I just ended up going back to smoke cigarettes, eat hot dogs, and pet the dog with no name. Night falls quickly after all this meditation, and I roll inside the tent to sleep. My buddy sleeps inside the tent next to my sleeping bag. This dog was fucking awesome, if you couldn't tell that yet. I wake up for no reason I can put my finger on, and my main source of warmth, a dog with no name, is missing. So I slide out of the tent, I guess I left it unzipped, and there she was, just sitting, waiting for me in pitch blackness, wagging her tail. I felt very strange, like something is happening here, and something or someone is telling me to get back down to the river and do the damn thing. So the both of us walked down the short trail together, surrounded by Missouri blackness. It's even colder than before, but I start to strip anyways, standing on the chilly stones of the dam. The dog with no name sits on the edge of the river, again, just watching me, a slight wag. I'm now as stark naked as could be, staring into this black pool that looks like some supernatural ink. I should mention here that I hate swimming in water I can't see the bottom of. My fearful imagination takes over and I freak out. In other words, I stand naked on the dam for over 10 minutes before I finally muster up the balls, albeit shriveled up and tiny, to say fuck it and dive into the blackness. It was cold as hell. It was scary as fuck. When I come up for air, I was thrashing wildly back towards the dam, scrambling back onto the slick stones. I shook out my hair and was surprised how the adrenaline helped me in keeping warm. As I pick up my clothes and shoes, I look over for my buddy at the river's edge. The dog with no name is nowhere in sight. Back up at the campsite, I'm looking around, gently whistling, that kind of thing. I'm more than woken up now, so I go ahead and start another fire. Dawn was just starting to break above the horizon. I have another hot dog for breakfast and figure I might as well just pack up and leave. This trip feels more than complete to me. As I start my car up and check my phone, there is an hour time difference between the two. This happened to fall on daylight savings time. I'm not calling it a supernatural rip in time, but it is funny how this night went down. In fact, the exact time would be around 3 to 4 a.m. that the dog disappeared. So the dog never showed up again. I never shot up heroin again. At the end of it all, I realized the dog was probably from a nearby farm and found her way, but I don't know. The coincidences are wild enough for me. My mind needed all of this at this time. So I went camping with the summer program when I was 16 years old. 12 other guys being managed by 4 adult men, and we were having a great time. S'mores, hot chocolate, campfire stories, the works. We all had to be in our tents and either sleeping or awake but quiet by 11 p.m. I was in a tent with 2 other guys staying up later just talking, typical teenage guy stuff. As one guy is talking, I start to hear heavy breathing nearby, like someone has just been running and is out of breath, but I ignore it and keep listening. I figure that I'm just a weird kid hearing things, or that it's one of the guys in the next tent making the noise while he's sleeping. Then we hear, "Please help me," from outside. It didn't sound like anyone in the group. It sounded like an old man out of breath. We all went dead quiet and listened to this guy breathe, then ask again with a whimper at the end. I don't know what possessed this guy near the front of this tent, but he turned on a flashlight and opened the inner flap but kept the outer zipper and looked out. We see just a pair of old, bare, scabbed, and pale legs just standing there. It looked like this guy had been walking nude through the woods for some time now. He asked for help but kept standing there. We were all paralyzed with fear, but the guy at the front managed to say, "Keep walking down the trail. A ranger should be around soon." The guy just stopped breathing and said, "No, no rangers. They keep me here." It was at this point someone else finally spoke up. A chaperone came out of his tent with a flashlight and cautiously asked him, "How long have you been out here? What happened to you?" The old man didn't answer. He just started sobbing and ran off into the woods. We saw by the flashlight that this guy was completely naked and pretty emaciated. I don't know if this guy was homeless, but nevertheless, it was pretty creepy. When I was 12 or 13 years old, some friends and I camped in a clearing in the woods a half mile or so behind my house. It was a heavily wooded area with a clearing about half the size of a football field. We got there during the day, collected some firewood, set up tents, etc. We had a fire, made s'mores, talked about hot chicks. We were definitely going to hook up with soon and talk shit to each other. We went to bed, and when we woke up in the morning, there were these tracks all over the place. Almost like tractor tracks or semi-tracks, and there were small holes dug in the sides of the tracks like a small shovel. The tracks were definitely not there the day before. There was at least 100 feet total of tracks split into 3 or 4 straight lines in the area. None of us had ever woken up or even heard anything during that night. What's even weirder was that there were no breaks in the trees wider than 4 or 5 feet in any direction. There's no possible way that anything could have fit through and got to us. I still have questions. I went hiking/backpacking with 2 friends in Montana. We were probably 5 miles from the nearest paved road and had hiked around 2 miles from the end of the dirt road. The spot isn't well traveled and is quite nondescript, but we all enjoyed getting away from the crowds and being out relatively alone, so we always gravitated to areas like this for backcountry camping. We built a fire and hung out, then piled into our tents for the night. All is normal, and we haven't seen a soul, or any recent sign of people, since we left the paved road. I have some trouble sleeping and was sort of just laying there for maybe about 30 minutes, and both my buddies were passed out. This is when it got weird. I hear from my side of the tent murmuring, which I was certain was a person making sounds under their breath. It didn't sound like real words, but almost like someone drunk and mumbling gibberish. My first thought was that one of my buddies was sleep-talking, but I listened closer and it was definitely coming from outside. I woke up my friend closest to me, and he woke up with a, "What?" I was a little irritated, and at that moment the muttering stopped. I shushed him and whispered to him what I'd heard. We waited a second, then it started up again, but seemed a lot closer this time. He heard it too, but we didn't hear any sounds of movement. I can still hear the voice, and it really fucks with me even 10 years later. He gave me a "what the fuck" face and proceeds to gesture that he's going to unzip the door and see what's outside. Right as he starts moving the zipper, we hear what sounded like someone taking a huge gasp of air before diving into a pool, seemingly from the opposite side of the tent we had originally heard the murmuring from. We both froze for a second before he pushed his flashlight out and looked in the direction and screamed, "Who's out there?" We really didn't see anything and never heard a single twig or any sound of movement. By this time, my other friend had woken up and we were still freaking out a little bit. We told him what was up and all took our lights out to see what the hell this thing was. But we saw absolutely nothing at all. We were both up for a little while longer, while a sleeping friend was out again fairly shortly thereafter. We didn't hear another odd sound at all, and in the morning, there was no sign of anyone. We cut our trip short to just that night and moved back to a camping ground the following day. We still have no idea who or what was outside of our tent. The only thing that would even make any semblance of sense was maybe an owl or a bat or maybe another bird. But I've spent many, many nights outdoors in the habitat, and I'm very familiar with all of these noises, including and especially this area. This was entirely different and, in my opinion, didn't come from any animal I'm aware of. Still gives me chills just thinking about it. Hey guys, it's Gote here. I want to thank you all very much for listening to this video. I really do love scary stories in the forest. It's one of my passions among many passions. But if any of you have any stories of your own, please feel free to send me them via my personal email linked in the description below, and I'll be sure to include that in one of my videos. So, stay safe out there during all this madness. I know it's beginning to lift, but hold out and just be smart about everything. I love you guys, and I'll see you mates in the next episode.